Hey everybody, I thought it was high time we take another trip around the world, and we're going to start here with my goldfish pond or koi pond, whatever you want to call it. I got a lot of fish in this pond that are not koi or goldfish. I got mollies in here, I've got barbs in here, I've got guppies in here, I've got rosy barbs, I've got neon barbs, I've got some rosy minnows, I've got some platies in here. I've got a couple of little catfish that we very rarely see. I do see them on occasion when I turn the lights on in the morning. The nocturnal catfish will be out swimming around, and then they make their way underneath of the island there. And that's where they spend the day hiding. So not a lot going on in the fish room in general. It's just been a while, so I wanted to go around and show everybody what's been going on. You can see all of the leaf litter on the bottom of the pond there. That's not in there for any specific reason other than the autumnal look of it. It is that time of year, and I like to throw some leaves in the pond, usually colored leaves. I let them float on the surface and sink to the bottom, and it gives a much more autumnal feel. Of course, we are well into the cold weather now. There's no leaves left on the trees, so it's appropriate they're all down at the bottom of the pond and littering the floor. Again, I like that look. Nothing really going on. I haven't changed anything. I haven't done anything other than some basic filter maintenance during my live streams. I usually try to do some pond maintenance during my live streams. So if you're interested in that, Friday night and Sunday night at 8 p.m., I do a live stream for a few hours down here, hanging out in the fish room. We smoke a lot of weed. We do a lot of fish stuff. And it's usually a good time to be had by all. So check that out if you're interested. In the meantime, I'm going to get on with around the world here. Again, not really much to talk about. Haven't done anything. Nothing really changed. I do have a bract opening up here. We'll just call that a flower for the sense of ease. But you can see how big that's going to be when it finally does open up. So maybe this weekend when we do our live streams, we'll have a little flower there in the background on the koi pond. So there you go. Just a quick look at what the pond's looking like at the moment. We're going to go ahead and turn that light off. It is very bright and causes a lot of glare on my other tanks as we make our way around the room. So my 29 miscellaneous here, as always, is still just ticking over like a clock. The vegetation's getting a little thick down here on the left side, so I may have to get in there and thin out some of that Java. I do that about once a year, maybe once every year and a half in this tank. I don't have really intense lighting in here, and as a result, I don't get a lot of vigorous plant growth like I do in my other tanks that I have much, much more heavily lit. All this tank has, I can't really lift the top too much because it's got stuff on top of it, but all this tank has is the little stock LEDs that came with it. So those are the kind of LEDs you would typically find on the hood of the inside of a fish tank, whereas when we look at some of my other tanks, my 55-gallon gourami tank here, for example, when we look at the lighting in here, it is actual outdoor floodlights. Now, I do have them turned down to about 1/3 of their actual output. I have a dimmer on them, but even at 1/3, having 4 of those floodlights in there is way, way more light than we're putting in with these little lights. And the result of that is that I don't have to change, or I don't have to get in there and maintenance those plants very often. I don't have to get in there and trim those plants because they just don't grow vigorously like they do in some of my other tanks. So back to the gourami tank. This one needs a little bit of work, needs a water change. The glass is getting a little grungy, need to get that wiped down. We'll probably do that on Friday night's live stream. That would be tomorrow if you're watching this video the day it posts. Again, nothing really going on in there, just a quick look at the tank. I got in there recently and we siphoned out a bunch of the cyanobacteria. We siphoned out a bunch of the Java moss. And you can see how the Java moss is already starting to grow back in. When I initially did the siphon, all of that moss is growing on a piece of wood. You can see the wood down there at the bottom. And when I did the siphon, you could see all of that wood. And it's only been, I don't know, a week and a half, something like that. And it's already completely covered over and you can't even see the wood underneath there anymore. So the Java moss is what I really have to maintain in this tank, and with all that high lighting and high nutrient levels that I've got in this tank, that Java moss grows like a weed, and I got to get in there fairly frequently and clear that out. After my last cyanobacteria treatment, you can see I got a little bit of stuff left on that rock in the back. And otherwise, all of these rocks are nice and clean now. So once that cyanobacteria got killed off, the pleco that's in here, I have a little rubber lip pleco in here, and you can see the number he's done on these rocks in here. He's gotten them nice and cleaned up again, and that's exactly what I was hoping for. The only areas that haven't been munched on are the areas that have the Java moss growing on it. So good job, little rubber lip there, looking good. All right, moving on to my 55. This one's a little more challenging to stand in front of because of the pond being in the way. Move that bucket out of the way so you don't have any glare. The only thing I've got going on in this tank that I find interesting is if you'll notice my little Buenos Aires tetra in there that has the growths on its nostrils or whatever. It used to have two of them. It looked like a pom-pom on either side of its face, and they've slowly been getting bigger. Still don't know what they are. Doesn't seem to be affecting the fish in any way, and it's not contagious. Clearly, by this point, every fish in the tank would have it. It's been a very long time that this fish has been swimming around like that. But last night I noticed that the pom-pom looking thing on the left nostril seems to have broken off or something. I don't know. It's different looking. It looks like it's either dying off or it's broken off or something. So it should be interesting to see what happens with that fish. I'm assuming it's just going to live out its whole life with those things on its nose, whatever they are. And then otherwise, of course, we've just got a nice busy little tank. Lots of activity. Somewhere in here we've got our our discus hiding. And by the look of all the stuff collected on the power head, I should probably get in there and clean that power head off. This is another tank I was thinking Friday night we might do some work in this tank. So again, check out my live streams if you're interested. Friday night, Sunday night, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. And this Friday, again tomorrow night, I'm hoping to get in here and do a big water change as well as the gourami tank. So that's on the agenda for this week. Alright, moving on to my 40 breeder. This tank is still kind of a work in progress. I haven't really decided what I want to do with it yet. I've been putting fish in it, but I haven't done anything else to the tank. But I'm also not unhappy with the way it looks. I kind of want to get this pothos out of there and all of these roots that are associated with the pothos. It just takes up a lot of space in the tank that isn't really part of the tank. It's just pothos roots that manage to get in there, and you can see how much visually they sort of clog up this side of the tank. It's all pothos root instead of all of my plants that we should be looking at. So I've got the new swordtails in there, and that's them. That's the two males. Here's the females. I have 3 of the females. I want to say they're called Sankey, S-A-N-K-E, Sankey. I have no idea how it's actually pronounced, but that is the type of swordtail they are. I've never seen them before, but they are really sharp looking fish. I'm really happy with them so far. There, of course, is Frank Gorshin, my angelfish, who's always a little bit get off of my lawny, as angelfish usually tend to be. They are cichlids, and they are, well, they're kind of dicks, but they're beautiful, so we put up with it. The other fish I have in here are the little bleeding heart tetras, which I really, really like, and I'm looking forward to watching them grow into full size and come into their own. And then, of course, we have some snails in there, and then we've got my rubber lip pleco that is doing an okay job. You can see these rocks are nice and clean, but I've also been putting algae wafers in there, and so not as much algae scraping as I would like to see. Again, you can see some nice clean rock back there. There's a little bit of the woodwork down here that's been scraped nice and clean, and the rocks back there nice and clean. So that's all that pleco, rubber lip pleco I have in here doing that. Even these plants over here are nice and clean and free of algae, and I wouldn't be surprised if that pleco was in there doing that. So I try to put as little algae wafers and stuff in the tank as possible, and I try to put as little excess food, even the regular old granules or fish food of any sort, makes its way to the bottom, and that pleco will eat it. And the more food I give it, the less it's going to find its own forage in the tank. And obviously, for a fish like a rubber-lip pleco, an algae scraping type fish, an off-flux scraping type fish, you want them to find as much in-tank food as possible. So there's always the balance between feeding the tank and letting the tank feed itself. So I'm probably overfeeding this one a little bit because it's getting a little bit green. I don't mind the algae, but I also like to see a balance of the algae, and it's swinging a little to the algae side at this point, so we're probably going to have to cut back on those wafers a little bit. So, alright, moving on. Having a look at my other 125 Darrell. This is my New World tank. I call it as such because it started off once upon a time as a native tank, and then I added some silver dollars, which are South American, and then I wound up adding some other fish that I think are South American, and then I wound up putting that tilapia in there, which is West African, and now I've got a shark in there, which is Indonesian. I got a jewel cichlid right there, which is also African. So really, this is not technically a New World tank, but anybody that's a regular viewer of mine knows that I'm not a big stickler for biotopes and specifics and all that kind of stuff. So I just call it my New World tank, and we just wrap it. Honestly, I usually call it my other 125 Darrell, but that's an old joke, and I'm not going to explain it right now. So you either get that one or you don't. If you don't, and you want to find out why I call this tank my other 125 Darrell, you can hang out on my live streams, and you can ask me questions and talk to me and chat with me and hang out. My live streams are very interactive. I treat them basically as though anybody on the stream is a guest in my house. I will say that I expect my guests to behave appropriately and be respectful of my other guests and whatnot. But I treat people as though they're a guest in my home, and if you ask me a question, I do my best to answer it because I think it's very rude to simply ignore people when they ask you questions. So my live streams are very interactive. We hang out. Like I said, we smoke a lot of weed. We talk fish stuff. I get some work done. It's your chance to ask me questions about whatever. If it's something I don't want to answer, it's inappropriate, I'll tell you. But otherwise, if you're curious, you want to know something about me, or you want to know something about fish keeping, or maybe I said something in the past you didn't fully understand and you want me to elaborate on it, the live streams would be your time to do that. You can ask me questions and we can hash out the answers and have conversations about it much more thoroughly than a quick yes or no type answer. So again, check out my live streams if you're interested. I think you'll enjoy them and have a good time. Most people seem to. So if you'll notice, not a lot going on in this tank, and so not a lot to talk about. But I will say I've done a series of large water changes on this tank in the last week. I did a big one last Friday, like a very big one last Friday. And then on Sunday, we did almost as large a water change 2 days later. And I know it may not look any different to you, the casual viewer, but to me, this tank looks so much clearer. There was so much tannin built up in this tank. Remember, tannin, or tannic acid, as it's more appropriately called, does not only come from woodwork and leaves, but it also comes from living, growing plants. And so a lot of tanks, depending on the plants they have in their tank, can produce tannins and get that sort of tea-stained look in their water without having any woodwork in their tank at all. Although I can't imagine having a planted tank that does not have woodwork in it. Honestly, I can't imagine having any kind of tank at all that doesn't have some sort of woodwork and rocks and plants in there. That just looks natural to me. Anyway, as you can see, not much going on in here, but I do love this piece of woodwork, and that's why I'm spending so much time enjoying it. It's getting really thin. It's being scraped away by the plecos. If you actually look at this little edge right here, it's getting wafer thin. It is going to be gone pretty soon in the front. But I had a great day discovering that piece of wood. I had a great day going out and collecting that piece of wood, and I've enjoyed the hell out of it the whole entire time it's been in my tank. And so if, alas, someday it does, rot or get scraped away to the point where it needs to be replaced, that to me is all just part of the fun. I like making and setting up and designing tanks as much as I enjoy, the up and running, matured result of said construction project. So when that piece of wood goes, all that'll do is give me an excuse to find another piece of wood. So, alright, we'll tear ourselves away. We'll move on. Nothing really to talk about in the little snail tank there. I keep the lights turned out because if I do turn them on, we wind up getting algae growing in the water. You can see how the water's kind of green at the moment. But you can also see how I got plenty of snails in there. This is all snails that are going to be food for my puffer, Butterbean. We'll see him at the end of the video, and you can see all those snail eggs all over the glass, or in this case the acrylic. And so I never have any short of supply of snails. Alright, getting on to my ham tank. Well, technically it's fancy angelfish, but they all act like hams when I stand up here in front of the tank, especially if I got a camera in my hand. So I'm really liking the way this tank is starting to turn out. Getting lots of lily pad coverage. In fact, we're getting so much pad coverage in here that I can come in here and I can even slap my pads. I don't know if the fish appreciate it when I slap my pads, but I enjoy slapping my pads. And so now I've got some pads worth slapping. The fish are doing okay. I'm a little concerned about Blackie. That's the big white one with the giant orange brain sac. Recently had some swim bladder issues. I've medicated the tank, and now those swim bladder issues seem to be resolved. But there's this weird sort of white growth on the top of the fish's head, and I'm not 100% sure what's going on with that. If you see that sort of whitish looking stuff, it's been there for a long time. It doesn't seem to be growing or changing or anything, but it just doesn't, it looks weird. I don't know exactly what's going on with that. It almost looks like some sort of fungal infection growing on the top of its head. And so I'm definitely going to be keeping my eye on that. Maybe I'll treat the tank with some fin and body cure or something, which again is only an antibiotic, so I don't know if that would help or not. Otherwise, everything is going all right in the tank. I do a live stream for my members only on Wednesday nights, private live stream. And while we were in there last night, or while we were doing the live stream last night, I got in and I changed out the filters and got this tank all nice and done up. So we could probably still use a glass cleaning in the front, but otherwise everything in this tank is ticking over just fine and looking good. My only concern at this point, again, is that sort of white looking stuff that's developing on Blackie's giant brain sac back there. And I know when he's under the bright part of the light, it's really kind of hard to see. It sort of washes out the camera, but I think you can kind of tell what I'm talking about. He's got that weird, there's a good look at it. Look at that. I just don't know what that is. It almost looks like it's got a yeast infection on its head. So, again, maybe I'll have to look into that a little more and find out what's going on if it doesn't eventually clear up. Doesn't seem to be concerned, it doesn't seem to be a bother, but I don't know what it is, and it's bothering me if you can't tell. Alright, tearing ourselves away, moving on. This is my tank where I usually do the pad slapping, but I think we're going through a sort of dormant stage with my lily pads. I haven't had a good flower in a while. I did have a flower spike stick up a little while ago, but it never opened. You can see I've got some dead stuff going on in here. Got to pull this dead frond out, a little bit of rotten leaves, that kind of stuff. So a little bit of maintenance needed on this tank. Maybe we'll get in there during the live streams this week and get that done. As far as what is going on in the tank, we got two things worth talking about. One is the catfish that I have in this tank that we cannot see at the moment. I've been looking at it more lately, and I got a good look at it last night during my members live stream. In fact, I tried to get a video of it, but as usual, as soon as I stand in front of the tank and point a camera at it and start shouting, it scares the hell out of the fish and they all go and hide. And that's exactly what this catfish did. I bought it as a Synodontis uterus, commonly known as an African featherfin squeaker, and I did that to replace the former African featherfin squeaker that I had in this tank. It was a really good looking fish. It was an outgoing fish. I really enjoyed that, and I don't know what happened to it. I think maybe it swallowed some gravel by accident or got some kind of intestinal blockage, because at about 8 years old it just started looking funny and swimming funny, and within a couple days it was dead, and I have no idea what happened to it. So I tried to replace it with another one, but I have determined that what I purchased is not a Synodontis utaris. I don't know what it is, but it's definitely not what I purchased it as. So I've got some miscellaneous Synodontis catfish in this tank, and I don't know what species it is, but it is absolutely not the African featherfin squeaker. It's got a real short, stumpy sort of dorsal fin, and that's where the African featherfin squeaker gets its name. It's got a big, flowing, feathery looking dorsal fin, and the patterning on the dorsal fin, the markings look like a bird's feather. And so it's called a featherfin. All of its fins look like feathers. They have the brown spots all over them, and it's a very distinct looking fish. This fish is not that fish. It has no spots on it. It's got this stumpy little dorsal fin. So I don't know what it is. I don't know what species of Synodontis it is. It's clearly a Synodontis, but it is not the Utaris. I don't know what it is. So got a mystery fish in the tank. And then the other thing we noticed last night during my live stream, I didn't really notice the behavior, but everybody that was watching kept telling me that my discus were spawning again. This will be the third or fourth time I've had the discus spawn in this tank. So once again, suck it discus keepers who tell me I'm doing it wrong all the time. Apparently the fish disagree with you, because the fish are happy and healthy and looking beautiful and vibrant, and they apparently spawn on a regular basis. So last night during my live stream, I was told they were at it again, although I never really witnessed that behavior. So I did put a piece of slate in the corner. I put it near the heater, because in the past they've been laying their eggs on the heater. I do not see any on the heater now, so whatever they were doing last night that my viewers were seeing, they were not laying eggs. They must have just been going through the sort of pre-spawn dance motions or something. I don't know. I'm not sure what they were talking about, but I don't see any fresh eggs this morning. But we do now have a piece of slate in there, and so if they're going to lay on that piece of slate, I can maybe do something about it. Maybe we can get some of those eggs to hatch. I'm not terribly worried about that, but it is a possibility. And with them being, put on that piece of slate, I can then remove the slate from the tank and put it in a quarantine tank or something and just raise the babies without having to worry about them getting gobbled up by the other discus or the rainbow fish or anything else that I've got in this tank. So that's the only two things that are really going on in here. Is I've discovered that one of my fish is an imposter. Is not what I bought it as. And of course we had the supposed alleged spawning action happening again last night, so we now have a piece of slate in the back, and hopefully if they do lay again, they'll lay on that slate, and maybe this time I'll be able to try to get some to hatch or something. I don't know. I've never hatched eggs before. I've never bred fish. So if discus are the first cat out of the bag, that'll be pretty interesting if I can breed discus as my very first fish to breed. And I'm not counting the fact that, I got a bunch of platies upstairs and my live bears keep popping out babies. That just doesn't count as far as breeding fish as far as I'm concerned. So my little 20-gallon tank has my betta fish in here. This is Gil Galid. Gil for short. And he is an absolutely awesome fish. I am so in love with this little guy. I never thought I'd be a betta fish guy, but I am. I've got another one in my office tank upstairs. It's a Plaquette Galaxy Koi, and it is just absolutely beautiful. This one is a half moon. Male, obviously. And it's got so much personality, I can't believe it, for such a tiny little fish. The rest of the tank is doing well. You can kind of see the tail end of my catfish sticking out of the gravel there. He spends most of his time buried in the substrate. I do see him occasionally lying on the surface in the morning, but by the time I come back in after the lights have been on for a little while, he's buried in the substrate again. And it's not exactly like that's a brightly lit tank. You can see how much of the top of it gets blocked. Even on this side, there's all sorts of stuff to block the light. This African water fern is awesome. Love this stuff. Apparently so does that nearite snail, getting in there, keeping everything nice and clean for me. So I've also got a couple of guppies in this tank, and I also have a school of ember tetras. There, we can see one now. You see that little orange fish there? That's an ember tetra. I got 7 of those in here, but we are shortly after lights on in the morning. I just turned the lights on and then got around to doing this video, and most of the fish are still a little skittish at this time of day, and we're not really seeing them out swimming around. So once again, Gil Galad here, my little betta fish. His friends call him Gil. And then that's an overall look at the tank. So maybe, again, we'll get in here this weekend. During the live streams, we'll thin out some of this. I like a little bit of light to get in the tank. So that's getting a little overgrown between the water sprite, which is what the actual plant is, and then we've got all of the, where's he going? There he is. We got all the duckweed in there that could stand coming on out of there as well. Thin that out a little bit. Got my quarantine tank down there. There's nothing in the quarantine tank. I usually try to keep a couple of fish in there or something just to keep it cycled and running. Right now, all that is in there is a bunch of snails. So I guess technically they are putting some kind of bioload in there and keeping it up and cycled, but we shall see. So moving on to my last but not least tank. This is my 40-gallon, formerly used to call this my brackish tank because my figure 8 puffer back there used to be kept in brackish water. But over time, I have reduced the salinity, and in fact, I've reduced the salinity all the way down to the point where it's just my tap water. There's no added salts or minerals or anything. In fact, this puffer is in softer water than my discus are. My discus have, within the canister filter in the discus tank, I have some crushed coral. I don't have a lot, but I have enough in there that it's putting some mineralization in the water. It's putting a little bit of carbonates in the water, a little bit of calcium, a little bit of magnesium. So I'm getting a little bit of general hardness and a little bit of carbonate hardness in my discus tank, as with pretty much all of my tanks. This tank, however, I never added the crushed coral to it because I was always adding marine salts, and there was no need to add mineralization. I was adding the mineralization by way of making it into brackish water. But I don't do that anymore. I just do water changes with my tap water, and so now this tank has nothing to add any carbonate or add any hardness at all. It is just soft water with very, very low carbonate and very, very low mineralization or general hardness. And he's doing well. He's doing better than he was when he was in the brackish water. So I think I still need to put some mineralization in here, just not a whole lot. So I am going to get some kind of piece of small chunk of limestone. Maybe I'll get a cuttlebone and put a cuttlebone in there somewhere, tuck it out of the way where you can't see it really. But I want to put something in here that gives me just a little bit of mineralization, gives me just a little bit of carbonates, and sort of keeps everything nice and stable. Although, this is one of those tanks, like, I don't want to mess with it because it just ticks over like a clock, and other than being a little grungy, I just never have issues with this tank. It never, well, I'm knocking on some wood here, it just never causes me problems. Again, need to get in there. You can see some of that hair algae has gotten out of control, and there's a little bit of stuff that we could vac out of there across the back on the spray bar, you know, so it needs some maintenance, a little grungy. But health-wise, Butterbean's doing better than ever now that he's in this nice soft water, which really kind of surprises me. So we'll see. As time goes on, I may adjust it back the other way a little bit, but for now we're going to go ahead and we'll leave it the way it is. Again, just straight up tap water. There's no minerals added, there's no carbonates added or anything. So, alrighty, that makes the trip all the way around the world complete. We're going to stop back here with the koi pond where we started. We'll get that light turned back on. And I can get on with my day now. So, thank you very much for watching. If you're still with me, I hope you enjoyed that whole video. Don't forget what I was saying about my live streams. It is a good opportunity to just hang out with me. I don't do my live streams the way a lot of other people do. As I said, I sort of treat everybody as though they're a guest in my home. I expect people to act accordingly, and you will, of course, be treated accordingly. And as I've always said, it's a good time for all to be had. So check out Friday night, Sunday night, 8 p.m. live streams. You want a third live stream, a private live stream for members only, then you can join membership for $2.99 a month. That will also get you access to my Discord server. and we have a lot of fun over there on the Discord as well. So check that out if you're interested. If not, hopefully I will see you Friday night. Otherwise, I'm going to say thanks for watching. I'll see you real soon in the next one.